Okay, in this episode we are going to install the outer stem, I guess, on both ends. You got the end grain here of the cedar strips going over where the end out here, and this is basically going to be a cap, I'm assuming, that covers that up. It'll also round the edge. I'm going to start by sanding down to the inner stem with the belt sander, get a nice flat surface, and then I'm going to very carefully carve this guy into the proper shape. I'm not going to go very sharp. A little bit less than sharp is fine. It won't get damaged as much when I touch things with it. Okay, as you can see, I have these shaped. Roughly, they are intentionally a little bit oversized. That's why that's so that I can take the sander, probably the orbital, maybe the belt sander, and trim these down to their final shape. Basically, take the belt sander and very carefully go over the harder oak without touching the cedar, and get it down really close, and then go over with the orbital and get a final blending of the oak and the cedar. I'm going to go ahead and screw these on. I'm going to use a sort of stainless. I'm going to countersink and drill and screw these on with some epoxy. Let this set up overnight so I can sand it again tomorrow. I will. So you mix this for about 45 seconds to a minute, good, before you mix any of the filler in. 1 squirt each, ounce and a half of epoxy, and it looks like a quarter cup of the wood flour. It's a maple from Justin 3. You're shooting for mayonnaise consistency for this particular gluing application like that. For a fillet application, you would shoot for peanut butter. You want it to stand by itself. Test for this is whenever you pick a glob of it and put it on your stick, it doesn't run off, or just barely runs off for the mayonnaise consistency. So this is about a teaspoon shy of a quarter cup of filler. A full quarter cup would get me a nice peanut butter consistency, but here you can see it stands by itself once I get it mixed a little bit more. You want it wet enough to fill the wood grain, but stiff enough that it doesn't run completely out of the joint. So that's actually pretty good right there. I'm going to put this on. And you want enough on the joint so that whenever you put the wood block on here, it will actually squish the epoxy out. You want to leave a little bit for the joint itself, but you want enough on there so that it's completely filled. You don't squeeze it all out, obviously, but generally the wood's not a perfect fit anyway, so it doesn't squish it all out. Some people say you shouldn't embed stainless in epoxy because you'll get crevice corrosion, which is probably true, but this is not really a structural joint. This is to hold this thing on until the epoxy sets, so I'm not too worried about the corrosion. If I just use steel, which I could very well do, it would rust on me basically, and I don't want the rust. So this screw is actually going to go in probably about 3/8 of an inch, but it's mainly just to hold this in place until the epoxy sets. At the top. See how it's squished out there when I screwed that down? That is just about perfect. And there you have the outer stems. It wasn't quite as hard as I thought it would be. I did find that the belt sander actually took the oak down really slow, so I used the flap disc on the grinder, as you saw, to knock it down fairly close. I was really worried about the oaks being so much harder than the cedar and the belt sander scarring up the cedar, but actually the epoxy right next to the oak absorbed most of that, so I could actually touch the belt sander to the cedar a little bit and get it fairly close, and then I cleaned it up with the 60 grit on the orbital sander. So that worked pretty good. Now I'm going to fill little holes and let it harden up and do some finish sanding over the next couple of days. I really like this sharp edge here on where these strips are going together on the stem. However, what you're going to run into when I try to do the fiberglass to span this edge, it's not going to lay down. Fiberglass really doesn't like to turn a really sharp corner like that. So what I'm going to have to do is knock that down, try to simulate a 1/4 inch radius. This is what's called a long board. It's essentially a piece of 1/4 inch ply, and it will span the curve and let me evenly knock it down. I'm not necessarily going to need to knock down the front here because I'll just split the glass there and have the two pieces come together. But on the top, even if I put weights on it, I don't think it's going to span that knife edge. So I'm going to knock it down to about a 1/4 inch radius, and then next episode I will be gluing this, or excuse me, next episode I'll be glassing this, and that should be interesting. I still have a few minor gaps here, but once I get the glass on there and put some epoxy on there, it'll fill all those in and they'll be completely invisible. Anyway, I'm going to knock this down. I'm going to film that. I'm also going to